So today's objective is to divide exponential expressions and simplify completely. We have x to the negative second, y to the negative 3, over x to the fourth, y cubed, all to the negative second power, divided by x to the negative fourth, y cubed, over x to the negative first, y squared, all squared. Okay, so if we start simplifying the first set of parentheses, negative 2 times negative 2 becomes x to the fourth. Negative 3 times negative 2 is 6, so that's y to the sixth, over x to the fourth to the negative second is x to the negative eighth, and 3 times negative 2 is negative 6, so that's y to the negative sixth. We'll keep the division sign for right now till we get the second part simplified. Okay? So the second set of parentheses becomes negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Y cubed squared becomes y to the sixth, over x to the negative first squared becomes x to the negative second. Y squared squared becomes y to the fourth. Okay, I came back. Alright, so we'll go ahead and simplify the first set of parentheses as far as we can. There are 12 more x's on top than there are on bottom. That becomes x to the 12th. And there are also 12 more y's on top than there are on bottom. So that's x to the 12th, y to the 12th, and there is nothing on the bottom. So for right now, we'll just put a 1, because that's not our final answer. But in your final answer, we do not put a 1 on the bottom. We'll go ahead and keep the division sign for right now, because we still don't have the second set of parentheses completely reduced. So there are 6 more x's on the bottom than there are on the top. And there are 2 more y's on top than there are on the bottom. So when we're dividing fractions, we keep the first fraction the way it is. So that's x to the 12th, y to the 12th over 1. We change this division sign into multiplication. In the second fraction, we take the reciprocal. So that becomes x to the 12th, y to the 12th, times x to the 6th over y squared. So we have x to the 12th here and x to the 6th on this second fraction. That becomes x to the 18th. And there's 12 y's on top and 2 y's on bottom. That 1 cancels out. Okay, so now in order to simplify the rest of the way, we have no x's to cancel out, so that becomes x to the 18th. And there are 10 more y's on top than there are on the bottom. So y to the 10th. So our final answer would be x to the 18th, y to the 10th. So we have x to the negative second, y cubed, over x cubed, y to the 5th, all squared, divided by x to the negative second, y to the 5th, over x cubed, y to the negative second, all to the negative first power. So we'll start out like we did the last one, and we'll start simplifying the first set of parentheses. So we have x to the negative second squared becomes x to the negative fourth, and y cubed to the second is y to the sixth, over x cubed to the second is x to the sixth, y to the fifth squared becomes y to the 10th. For right now, we'll keep the division sign, and we'll go ahead and simplify the second set of parentheses. X to the negative second to the negative first becomes x squared. Y to the fifth to the negative first becomes y to the negative fifth. And x cubed to the negative first becomes x to the negative 3. And y to the negative second to the first becomes y squared. As we continue on, we go ahead and simplify what's in the first set of parentheses. There are 10 more x's on the bottom than there are on the top. And there are also 4 y's on the bottom, 4 more y's. So we'll go ahead and put a 1 there for the placeholder. Keep the division sign until we have the second part completely simplified. And there are 5 more x's on top than there are on the bottom. It's x to the 5th. And there are 7 more y's on bottom than there are on top. Now comes the fun part. So we have 1 over x to the 10th, y to the 4th, so that part stays the same. We change the division to a multiplication sign, and now we take the reciprocal of y to the 7th over x to the 5th, is what that becomes. Now we multiply across, so we have 1 times y to the 7th, which is just y to the 7th, over, we have 10x's here and 5x's here, that becomes x to the 15th, because when you multiply with the same base, and you just add the exponents, and y to the 4th. It's still not simplified completely because we have y's on top and y's on the bottom. There are 3 more y's on top than there are on the bottom, so they stay on top. And there are only x's on the bottom, so your answer would be y cubed over x to the 15th. So we have x cubed y to the 4th over x to the 5th y squared all to the negative 3 divided by x to the negative 3 y over x to the negative 2nd y to the negative 3 all to the negative 2nd power. So we'll start out by raising everything to the negative 3rd power in the first set of parentheses. So that becomes x to the negative 9 y to the negative 12 over x to the negative 15 y to the negative 6. We'll keep the division sign for now, and we'll raise everything in the second set of parentheses to the negative 2nd power. X to the negative 3 to the negative 2nd power becomes x to the 6th, y, which is right now is to the 1st, to the negative 2nd power becomes y to the negative 2nd, over x to the negative 2nd to the negative 2nd power becomes x to the 4th, and y to the negative 3rd power to the negative 2nd power becomes y to the 6th. We'll continue by simplifying the first set of parentheses. There are 6 more x's on top than there are on the bottom, and there are 6 more y's on the bottom than there are on the top. For now, we'll still keep the division sign and simplify what's in the second set of parentheses. There are 2 more x's on top than there are on the bottom, and there are 8 more y's on the bottom than there are on the top. So when it comes to dividing the two fractions, now that they're completely simplified, we keep the first set the same, so that's x to the 6th over y to the 6th, change the division to multiplication, and take the reciprocal of x squared over y to the 8th, which becomes y to the 8th over x squared. Now we simplify. So we get x to the 6th, y to the 8th, over x squared, y to the 6th. Now we simplify. There are 4 more x's on top than there are on the bottom, and there are 2 more y's on top than there are on the bottom, so your final answer would be x to the 4th, y squared. So we have x to the negative 2nd, y to the negative 3, over x squared, y to the 4th, all to the negative 2nd, divided by x squared, y cubed, over x to the negative 4, y cubed, all to the negative 1st power. So we'll start with the first set of parentheses. Negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. And negative 3 times negative 2 is 6, so y to the 6th. Over x squared to the negative 2nd is x to the negative 4th. Y to the 4th to the negative 2nd is y to the negative 8th. Keep the division sign for now and simplify the second set of parentheses. X squared to the negative 1st is x to the negative 2nd. Y cubed to the negative 1st is y to the negative 3rd. X to the negative 4th to the negative 1st is x to the 4th. And y cubed to the negative 1st is y to the negative 3rd. Alright, so now we continue on by simplifying what's in the first set of parentheses. There are 8 more x's on top than there are on bottom. And on the top there are also 14 more y's. So that's x to the 18th, y to the 14th. And for now we can just put the 1. Divided by, simplify what's in the second set of parentheses, there are 6 more x's on bottom than there are on top. And there are no more y's on top than there are on the bottom, so the y's cancel. So it's just 1 over x to the 6th. So now we change we keep the first fraction, that's x to the 8th, y to the 14th over 1, change the division to multiplication, and take the reciprocal of the second fraction, that's x to the 6th over 1. So basically all you're going to have are the top parts of fractions. You're not going to have a fraction, you're just going to have a whole number, which would be x to the 14th, y to the 14th. So we have x to the 4th y cubed over x to the negative 4th y squared, all to the negative second power, divided by x squared y cubed over x to the negative 4th y cubed, all to the negative first. So simplify what's in the first set by multiplying everything to the negative second power. So x to the 4th to the negative second power becomes x to the negative 8th. Y cubed to the negative second power becomes y to the negative 6th. Over x to the negative 4th to the negative second power becomes x to the 8th. And y squared to the negative second power becomes y to the negative 4th. We'll keep the division sign for now and start reducing what's in the second set of parentheses. So x squared to the negative first becomes x to the negative second. Y cubed to the negative first becomes y to the negative 3 over x to the 4th y to the negative 3. We start simplifying the parentheses. There are 16 x's, more x's on the bottom than there are on top, and there are 2 more y's on bottom than there are on top. So we have 1 over x to the 16th y squared. Keep the division sign for now. There are 6 more x's on the bottom than there are on the top, and the y's again cancel out. So we have 1 over x to the 16th y squared. This now changes to multiplication, and now we take the reciprocal of 1 over x to the 6th, which is just x to the 6th over 1. Now we simplify, we get x to the 6th over x to the 16th y squared, which equals the x's cancel on top, so it's 1 over x to the 10th y squared.